Hello, my name is Vanessa Muirhead. Welcome to the Removing the Mask of Leadership discussion, where we will delve into the three topics that are really discussed in healthcare leadership. First, we'll be looking at values. How do our beliefs affect how we lead ourselves and other people? Authenticity. What does it actually mean to be an authentic leader? And finally, intersectionality. How can we take a more holistic approach to look at ourselves as leaders, as unique individuals, rather than just focusing on our gender, our race, ethnicity, our social background? Fortunately, I do not have to answer these introspective questions myself because I am joined by a fantastic panel of guests who all have lived and diverse experiences of leadership in healthcare. They all bear both the scars and boldly and humbly hold up the trophies of sustained leadership. I'm excited to introduce you to Professor Chia Dechi, the first Professor and Dean of Digital Education in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry at Queen Mary University of London. On the screen online, we have Professor Chloe Hawkins, who is Consultant and Professor of Infection Inequities. She's also the former academic lead for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion and former President of Medical Women's Federation. And finally, I have Manu Matur, who's Professor in Dental Public Health and Primary Care in Queen Mary University, London. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us in what I know will be a great discussion. So let's start with talking about values. In the course, we cover values, what are beliefs and how these beliefs affect how we lead. Some of the values that we cover in the course: security, autonomy, power. These are really, really essential core beliefs. So maybe I'll start with you, Chia, because you are probably the most reflective person I know. You've had an international career in the UK, in Australia and Japan. So you've had such a wealth of experience that's probably shaped your core values. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your core values. What are they and how they've shaped your leadership?
Thank you. So firstly, this is a really important question, I think, and one that a lot of us get asked to think about. And I had to say it's one of the most important but complex questions if you really dive deep into thinking about it. And I've done a few leadership programs where I was asked, and I had to say, first couple times, I didn't really understand what really values meant. And you're given with the list of 20 to 30 values, right, in keywords. And I had to really think about it over time. And so I can share three core values that I hold really dear to my heart and that I think really impact on the way that I perform as a leader. And I have to say, I had to refine this over many years. First one is around curiosity. I think I've been always very curious about how people performed and learned and grew. And that really leads into me working in the business of education, and now it's digital education. And that really gives me a lens to have compassion, and so putting myself into the lens of others. And by understanding how people work and what really makes them tick, I think I can lead the team and team of people better. So curiosity is one, and I think it's important for me to have it as a leader, to be interested in the people that I work with. The second one is courage. And as you say, I've had moved around a fair bit and jumping into different cultures. And I never left my home country, Japan, until in my 20s. And so I wasn't really prepared to look into international academic scene until much later on in my life. And so courage means taking risks and jumping into a new culture. And by culture, I mean all sorts of things, with the view of learning from this. It takes courage, making myself vulnerable to be in those spaces where I don't know a lot about. And so every time I move and go into new leadership roles, courage is something that I hold on to. And the last one is integrity. Integrity for me means choosing courage over comfort. And that's something that Brené Brown, it's one of the leadership figures that I look up to, talks about. So with integrity, I'm choosing what's right over what's easy, fast, and fun. And so sometimes in leadership roles, you're asked to make certain decisions that are not going to be popular or easy. You need to have really good reasons as to why you're making those decisions. And so I hold on to my integrity in terms of believing in that this is the right thing to do, even though it might not be easy thing to do. And so curiosity, courage, and integrity. And like I say, over the years, I had to come to finessing those values. And it's not always something that I had from the beginning. But now I think these are the three core ones that I think really important to me as a leader.
I think there's so much richness in that. And I think the first one you mentioned about being curious. And I think that's given you that sense of compassion when you lead. And I think it gives people who you lead probably sort of the psychological safety to make mistakes and share their ideas and take risks, because you're curious and you're compassionate. That's just really profound. And also that the braveness that you've had to be not being scared to work in different environments and moving. And the last one about the integrity and doing what's right, even if it's not popular, that's really, really, really important. Yeah. Chloe, so has that resonated with you, the values that Chia has expressed?
Yeah, I think they are absolutely lovely values and very, very true to what I know of Chia in my experience of her professionally and personally. In terms of me, I don't know. I haven't been on any leadership courses, so I don't have any sort of formal framework to put things into. So I think I'd have to say professionally, I would consider my value to be a question. And the question is, how can I help? And I think that is the thing that guides me in my professional life. The question, that single question, how can I help, is what is my main orientation.
I think that really resonates to one of the topics that we've been covering, one of the theories that we've been looking at in week one on servant leadership. And I guess as a clinician, as a consultant, someone who's passionate about underrepresentation, I think that really does resonate. So I think that so aligns with the concept of servant leadership and wanting to help and where you can contribute.
I think it is right, but I think that it can go beyond, so it can be extrapolated to other leadership models beyond servant leadership. Servant leadership is one of the only leadership styles that I actually am conversant enough to discuss. And I think it's something that I did during the pandemic. I think I led in a sort of servant leadership style, literally for the organization, delivering for the organization in a crisis. But I've realized that actually using my more natural leadership styles, you can orientate yourself within any leadership style to the question, how can I help? I think that I still feel that is the most important question, but I think it's quite a versatile question and can actually be extrapolated into different leadership models.
And I think you just mentioned the fact that you mentioned also that the changing your values, how they're shaped in different contexts, and how in COVID it was very, very different. Yeah. What about you, Chia?
Yeah, so I really like the way you framed it as a question, because it really underpins what I was thinking about. Values can change, but if you hold a question, then you can answer to that, and then those answers might be shaped by the context in which you're working at that time. And so I really like that. And knowing Chloe as well, how can I help, is really framing you really well. And so even understanding what that question is for you as a leader is a good thing to be thinking about. And so I really like that. And Manu might have a different perspective on it.
I'd just like to reflect on one thing, which just taking off from where Chloe left. Now, interestingly, this question was asked in 2015. So we have got something called as a Health Systems Global Conference, which is held every year. And this issue around leadership became very prominent in 2014 and 2015. And everyone was trying to answer this question around what are the ideal values of a leader. There were about 40 or 45 different phrases which were given by people. Three things which stood out. And I think three things which had an impact on me. One is a leader should be knowledgeable. Second, a leader should be flexible. And thirdly, a leader should be a team player. Now, I don't know which leadership style this fits into, but these three things are very important, especially in the context of clinical sciences, medicine and dentistry. We try to cultivate this habit of creating I-shaped individuals. We get that depth of knowledge in one particular subject, but we do not have breadth of expertise, and there we lack. So my mentor always used to say that we should try to inculcate this habit of creating T-shaped individuals. You have got depth of expertise in your area, but you should have got breadth of knowledge of things which are happening around you. And only then you can lead a team.
I think that the concept of knowledge also is really important. You mentioned about curiosity, because sometimes we don't always know. Sometimes as a leader, there are bits that you're missing and you're sort of blindsided. So I think that's where being curious and open to ideas is really, really important. One of the things that we talk about on the course is when your values may be in conflict. So has there ever been a time when your values, your core values of curiosity, integrity, sort of compassion, conflicted with the organisation that you were in, and what did you do about it? How did you have to navigate that space?
So many times.
Okay. It's a good, relevant question. Relevant question.
And somebody of my mentor said this to me before. These kind of conflicted situations get harder the higher you go up in the hierarchy of leadership positions. And I think that's true. Now, it's mostly for me around organizational values that are driven by these neoliberal universities. And so it's beyond our immediate context, but it's something that's driving these systems of universities and higher education to work. When I came here in this new role, Dean for Digital Education, this didn't really exist. And it came with two key propositions. One was to transform the practice of digital education as a whole. I could answer that relatively well. I've done this kind of work as a scholar and a leader in many forums. I had some good ideas about that. But the other one was to expand the portfolio of online degrees. Now, if you hold the value of broadening access to education, I'm hugely driven by that because it brings education to many people who might not otherwise have access to that. But when it comes to the KPIs of the universities, it comes with certain numbers that you need to achieve as target. I'm hugely challenged by that because there are so many ways in which you can achieve that goal, and I want to keep my integrity intact. And so these are the kind of conflicted situations that I come across. And when I reflect back on it, again, one of my good mentors mentioned this to me. In the end, few hundred more students are the ones that you brought in, helped to bring in to access education. And so you want to be mindful of the ways in which you achieve that goal, but in terms of the target and the neoliberal society's pressure, in a way, you set aside from your values and you keep progressing in achieving that goal. And you can always merge these values some way or the other. And the leaders who can make sense of these intersections are the successful ones. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I work through the tensions.
So are you saying that your values are flexible because you've recognised that those other tensions and you've had to sort of adapt and have some flexibility with your values? Or would you say you hold on to those values regardless of the wider external pressures?
I think it's the way that it manifests that can be changeable. core values of mine won't change, but the ways in which you achieve that goal might change. It needs to be contextual. And so that's kind of how I grapple with the tension, but I'm sure other people would have different ideas on that.
Anybody else? Chloe, have you ever experienced a time where your values have you've been in conflict with your values in an organization? You've had the pressure.
Yeah, I think I would say that I have. I think that as a person, I feel that it's important to challenge thinking in a sort of understanding but sort of robust way. I think that one has. I think it's really, really important when you hear something that isn't right, speak up, whether it's easy or difficult, and that's a value for me. And I think that I have had experiences where I've had to learn how to speak up. I think it's a skill. I'm not saying I'm entirely got there, but I think that it's about allowing people to make mistakes. It's about understanding that, safe culture and, really understanding people's identities, intersectionalities, understanding really what other people are experiencing. It requires humility and a commitment to lifelong learning. And that people are allowed to learn, and you have to create a space for people to ask questions, to understand, and to go through a process of learning. And that can be a sort of a kind process of allowing people to move along their journeys, understanding people are at different points in their journeys. But it does require holding the line and making clear when things aren't okay, but not in a sort of very critical and damning way that people feel they can never speak up again or can't ask questions. And I think the biggest danger that we have is that we live in this world of binaries, and we live in this world where, all of us have these, well, not all of us, but I think there's a real push towards holding very extreme positions, on very important issues. And the ability to come together and to speak requires holding a space where you hold your perspective, but you're also able to listen and to take on board what other people are saying. So I think while trying to do that, I have found at times that listening to people's opinions has been difficult, but I've known that I have to listen and I have to make space in order to allow learning. That's been difficult, but it is an absolute value that speaking up should happen, and it's not always welcome. When you speak up, it's not always welcome, no matter how much you are willing to listen and hear. People don't always like to be told that what they're saying is difficult for other people. It's not inclusive. It's problematic. So it's speaking up on EDI matters is not necessarily comfortable. It's what Chia was saying. You have to do it whether it's fun or not fun, and it's generally not fun to tell people that they're saying things which are problematic in terms of other people, that are not kind or not inclusive of others.
I think that really speaks to one of your values about challenge and having been in that position where you want to challenge. So when you're in a situation where they hold values that are not yours, you're the sort of the spokesperson. You feel like that's really important for you, whether people agree with you or not. I think that's how you sort of handle conflict, is you've just been the voice that says, actually, I don't agree with this. So I think that's how you probably handled being in situations where it's gone against your values. Is that right? Yeah. What about you, Manu?
Well, I'll give a very basic example of this. I don't have much experience, but I have always been in the field. And there are various instances when you are doing a research project, when you are full of all your principles, your research theories and methods, and when you go in the field, things are very different. Yeah. And especially dealing with people in the system, they have a completely different value system altogether. So the idea was that, you enter into these kind of conflicting situations, and sometimes you feel that, why have I read so much of what I have read? These models will fail. The answer lies in 3 C's there. You have to communicate, you have to collaborate, and then you have to cooperate with them. And that's the way to move forward. You just can't get in and bulldoze your ideas onto somebody else, whether they are right, wrong, good, bad, it doesn't matter. You have to listen to the other person who's going to work with you. And that is where proper communication comes in. I come from a low and middle income country as per the classification. And I used to work on non communicable diseases because of my dental background. And whenever we used to go for these kind of research projects, funded research projects with NCD backing, the first answer which used to be given to me was, well, let us first handle our infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates. Then you come with your heart problems and asthma and all these things. So it's very important to communicate why this is important, why we are doing this now, and what is the importance of this. Then you have to ask them, how best we can work with you in order to solve these problems. Look, we understand there are issues there, but how best we can work with you. And then, yes, try to find out solution or try to find out workable partnerships and solutions which will help you in the long run. So not focusing on outputs, but on outcomes. And as Chia was pointing out, there is no short, quick fix solution. You have to be in the long haul. There is a very interesting African proverb which my mentor always used, that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you have to go together. So that's the answer, I think.
So I think that beautifully follows on to the sort of the last question in this section, was about having to adapt your leadership in different environments. And I think you've just illustrated that. How have you had to adapt to your leadership in different environments?
I think that I started off my career very much in a sort of collaborative leadership style in the clinical team, leading the clinical team on the wards and in the clinics. And that was a very comfortable leadership style for me. And then in the pandemic, I had to work with people I've never met before and coordinate a very large number of staff across the 5 hospitals of Barts Health, and try and bring together people I'd never met and never seen before towards a common purpose, which is delivering research across the patch during the pandemic and building the vaccine trial center in the library. So we had to work with a large number of people. And in that situation, I fully adopted the servant leadership model, which was literally delivering an outcome for the benefit of the organization. And I really felt most of the time that I almost didn't exist as a person. My own personal qualities were irrelevant. It was about the role. And I think that had its benefits for the situation, it had its disadvantages. And then I think afterwards, I probably took on what could be considered to be a meta-modern leadership style, which is where who I am is very much sort of centered in terms of the leadership that I offer, so that who I am is part of the leadership package, and that I make visible my own experiences as a way of trying to shape an organization where there is a place for people like me in the organization, because my ordinary life is on show and visible.
Great. Well, can I come in on that, Sen? Thanks, Chloe, for giving me a bit more time to think about it, because your example around the pandemic time is a good one. Because if you think about adapting your leadership style, as we talked about it in a sense of values, I think there are certain things that you don't want to really change and adapt because it's part of your authenticity. But the contextual things like pandemic can allow you to adjust certain styles of leadership. And that was definitely the case for me too, Chloe. So at the time when pandemic happened, I was at a university where we had 65,000 students. And so over a month, all of them became online learners. And I was director of digital learning then. And so working very closely with Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic at the time, we created a SWAT team that met every day. And my workload was about 60 hours, 70 hours a week to just do that work of business continuity so that students and staff could continue to teach and learn during this highly disrupted time. Normally, I like to consult with people normally I like to collaborate with people in making decisions, but it wasn't the case. The time was not on our side. And so I quickly adapted to be able to provide the most evidence and data that we had at hand, but leave that element of making decisions to be a separate thing that we needed to do at the time. And so I became much more of an adaptive leader in making quick decisions where we could, so that we hit the goal of business continuity. And that was really a challenge for me because, as I say, normally I like to really look at data and evidence before making big decisions. But during that time, it wasn't the case. So I quickly adapted. But it's not sustainable in some ways. And so we need to be mindful of how long term you can do the adaptation of your leadership style in light of the authenticity that you're talking about.
I think it's something you mentioned before about there are some core values that are within you that you shouldn't really change, but in different situations, and we talk about situational leadership, how you need to flex those and you need to respond and be responsive to the situation you're in. But then you come back to your core values that don't change in any environment. You're talking. We'll now move on to sort of self-leadership, and we. And I mentioned before that I think you're probably the most self-reflective person I have, and I don't know if it's because your background is you've got PhD in linguistics, and maybe that has given you this idea of self-reflection. But so part of the course is thinking about working on yourselves, on thinking about your own strengths and being self-aware and emotional intelligence. So maybe we can ask you a little bit about your personal characteristics and what you've had to work on to become a better leader. We'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I'm smiling because it's in a way a very easy question for me to answer.
Oh, really? Is it easy?
Again, if I was to try and explain, it kind of becomes a bit complex. So in a simple answer, confidence is what I had to work through. Because...
Sorry, can I do low confidence or...
Low confidence.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, self-esteem. I think everyone comes across this, right? And whether if you're a leader or not. Pauline Clance, who was a scholar who called in the term imposter syndrome. We talk about this a lot, and Chloe, as my mentor, had to hear a lot about this from me too. But when she was studying the imposter syndrome in the 60s and 70s, they were finding out that, firstly, they thought it was a lot to do with high achieving women. And so this idea of deep and sometimes paralyzing idea that you don't deserve to be in the position that you are, or you haven't earned certain things in life. I certainly struggled with this because of the characteristics that you kindly explained, Vanessa, that now I sit in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry as a social scientist. I work with a lot of clinicians and the leaders of medicine and dentistry, and also other characteristics like I'm female, I'm from BAME or Black, Asian, minority, ethnic background, and I love it when people become behind the acronym. Not really. And then I'm also a non-English background, a speaking background person, and I'm also I look it, but I'm not that young. I'm also considered to be a youngish professor in the faculty. And I think back in 2017, Chloe, the senior leadership group of this faculty was about 70 male, 30% female, or something along those lines.
80-20, actually.
Right. See, so it was very skewed. And so for someone like me to come in, obviously, I feel outlier and people might see me as such. That has an impact on imposter syndrome becoming quite prominent in one's self-esteem. So I really had to work on confidence as a characteristics, and also the self-belief that one is in a certain role because of not just the labels that you can give, but also the things that you can do. And so one of the things that Chloe and people like Mark Caulfield, our head of the state, if you like, VP Health, taught me is no self-doubt. You are here because of what you can do. And so regardless of these labelings that you might put yourself against, you need to really find out what you can do and what you bring to the institution and the team and organization that you're working with. So in effect, it's the confidence, self-esteem that I had to work with. But now I'm coming to an understanding that I'm here for things that I can do. The other things that I can do is to challenge the status quo, a bit like what Chloe was saying. Because of the nature of the leadership roles held by certain figures and people that look like them, I'm here to challenge that. And I think just looking like the way that I do might challenge those people and the conversation. And for me, that takes courage. But I take the pride and pleasure and privilege in being able to do that. And I feel very privileged to be given that opportunity to do that, because there are other people who need to come and pursue leadership roles. And if we can't take that risk in being visible, nothing can happen.
So you had to work on the whole idea of self-belief and feeling that you deserve to have a seat at the table and having a record of achievement. I think that's probably, is that right? I think, yeah. Are you still working on it? Chloe, come in.
I do want to come in. So I would like to say something about what I think that everything that the chair said is really thoughtful, and I think it'll be very helpful for people to hear. And it's really a great example of representation. There's one thing I'd like to pick up on, and that's the use of the word syndrome, imposter syndrome. Syndrome is a medical word. And with the lens of health feminism, I would always say this whenever I hear the word imposter syndrome used. The concept was actually defined by Ames and Clance, and it was called imposter phenomenon. And it was originally coined to describe predominantly women in professional and also in higher education settings. And there's been a lot of discourse from particularly Black feminists who have pushed back on the use of the word syndrome and said that syndrome is a word that tends to pathologize women, and it's yet another disorder, medical disorder, and it pushes the problem of lack of confidence to be taken on by the woman. And in some way, you need to become more confident. You need not to have these feelings. And I know that imposter phenomenon can happen to men and to women, but it tends to become yet another, the onus of taking away the reasons that underpin imposter phenomenon are placed on the woman, that it's a personal journey the woman needs to go through to develop more confidence. And it takes away from the structural factors in society that cause women, particularly, and people from minoritized backgrounds, other minoritized backgrounds, to be marginalized and therefore to feel that it's harder for them to speak up or to be confident. And it sort of places, it's like you need to manifest yourself and you need to come into your full power. And actually, the reason people don't feel in their full power is because they're experiencing structural sexism, structural racism, structural ageism, structural ableism. And actually, society has responsibility as well as us. And we can't just become these pathologized sick people with another syndrome. We are a product of our societies, and how we feel is a product of our societies. So that's just a view from health feminism.
Perfect, because we're going to be talking about intersectionality and talking about those tensions, that structural racism, and how we exist in the reality of working in a leadership position. So we set us up for that question. Manu, talking about characteristics that you've had to work on in your self-leadership.
I think Chia and Chloe answered it very well. Let me first start by saying that it's an honor to be sitting amongst three very high-achieving ladies who I really look up to, academic professionals, academic clinical professionals. But I think she answered it very well. I think belonging to a BAME background and spending most of my life in a country which does not speak English as the first language, it was a bit difficult. And no matter whatever you say, no matter how accomplished you are, you face this kind of a block, that there is a self-doubt, there are issues related to self-esteem. But as I said, this is where the beauty of participatory leadership lies, that the people who have entrusted you with a certain responsibility, they are the ones who should give you that kind of confidence, that you are here for your work and not for anything else. Rest, all the things does not matter. As long as your work speaks for yourself, you need not to worry about anything. And lead the way it should be led. Lead a department, a unit, a project in the way it should be led, rather than what other people wants you to behave or done in a certain way. I think that's the thing I would like to add. I think.
I think it's holding on to your beliefs as well. And I think you've just shown, really, I think all of it, you've really shown that in terms of level of self-awareness, and the fact the humility that you've really shown has just been really amazing. It's the reason why you're here really in your position.